Now, looking at some of the business functions that we can use with Algebra 2, here is a function. And do you think it's possible to actually do this? That this is saying if we start with a function, in this case r of x, and we subtract c of x from it, it's a totally different function, we get a third function. Do you think that's possible? Seems kind of strange, doesn't it? But if we think about it in little different terms, we see that maybe this can actually be true. Now, if I told you that profit was revenue minus cost, now sometimes those are kind of big words we aren't used to using a lot, or some of them, at least revenue. Or if we put it into the concept of profit is your income minus your expenses, then you say, yeah, well, yeah, if we look at the revenue cost as r of x and our cost function as c of x, then yes, it does actually make sense that our income, our revenue, minus our cost, all of our expenses, would equal our profits. In businesses, break-even points are important, and every manager wants to know where the break-even point is. If you remember, we talked about this in a class with Mrs. Nolt as one of the examples from when we were doing systems of equations. And we had said that a break-even point was the point where the total revenue, your total income, is just sufficient to cover your total cost. Now, suppose after graduating, you started a wireless internet company. You would want to know your break-even point, right? Yeah, at what point are you going to start making a profit? It's kind of important to anyone who has a business. Now, in this case, when we're working with it, the break-even point is going to be number of customers, because after all, you're going to get your income from how many customers you have. So how many customers do you need until you start making a profit? Well, of course, you're going to have startup expenses. If you're providing a wireless internet company, you have to create all of the infrastructure, all of the necessary internet connections, wireless systems, so that your customers can get onto the internet. So there's going to be a cost before you get customers. And then how many customers do you need before you break even and start making a profit? Now, when you're looking at break-even points, let's assume that you did an assessment and you figured that your monthly income is going to be 32x minus 0.21x squared. That's going to be your revenue. And you know from setting things up that your monthly costs are going to be 195 plus 12x. Now, you're making a large company, right? So actually, when we have X here, each X that's there means it's 1,000 customers. And I didn't mention this before, but you set this up in Europe, so you're using euros. After all, everyone wants to live in Europe, right? So your revenue, your income, and also your costs are going to be in thousands of euros. So this is a large company. So for this large company, where are your break-even points? Where will you start making money, making a profit? Now, as we look at your company's break-even point, sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. If we look at this graph, you notice that the blue function, the blue line, is your revenue function, and the red line, c of x, is your cost function. And c of x is linear, it's a straight line, and we know that the revenue function is an inverted parabola. Now, you can kind of look at this and start to get a clue for what we're looking for. When we're working with break-even points, we're looking for the place where the two intersect. So of course, down here is one place where the two intersect, where they cross, where they are equal to each other. And up here, there's another place. You say, well, Mr. Brubaker, why is there two break-even points with these two functions? Well, you can see from the picture of it, when you graph it, there has to be. But if you think about it, if you have Um, a wireless internet company, you have cost, and when you start out down here in the beginning, your costs are lower, or yeah, they're smaller amount, but you have cost even when you have no customers. So you're going to end up losing money because your cost is greater than your revenue down here. Now, at some point, you get enough customers that it covers your cost, and that's the first break-even point. And then that continues. As long as you have your pricing set up right, you will make more money than you spend. Your R of X, your revenue function, is going to be greater than your cost function. But when you go up to the top, back to the second place where they intersect up here, excuse my circles, you realize at some point, well, once you start to have more and more customers, your costs keep going up. But you reach a saturation point at some point. Your system can't hold anymore, and people start saying, "Well, okay, I'm going to try this service, but I don't like it. It's slow. I can't get on when I want. I can't download my videos because it's always buffering. It's really frustrating." Or I can't play my games because it's not fast enough. So then you start losing customers at some point, but your costs stay up at the same amount. So there can actually be two break-even points for a company. Um, just when you're starting up and you're small and you start making money, but also when you get a little bit too big and you can't provide as good a service as you want. Obviously, you want to be somewhere between these 2 points so that you're giving good service to your customers and also making a profit. You keep your customers that way, you keep in business that way. It's a good thing. Now, we look at these and we say, how do we find these 2 points? Well, we talked about that in class with Mrs. Knoll. We find these things when our revenue equals our cost. So setting the 2 functions equal to each other not only tells us our profit, setting them equal to each other tells us our break-even points. And when the revenue is more than the cost, then we know what our profit is. Now, it's also true when our revenue is less than our cost, that is our profit, but of course it's a negative profit. We're losing money. And that's not a situation we want to be in as a business. Now, if there was a scale on this particular graph, we would know that this happens somewhere at about 11,000 customers, where your first break-even point is, and the second one happens at about 84,000 subscribers. So this is a large company. You need 10,000 or 11,000 customers to break even, and then you start making a profit until you have about 84 or 85,000 customers. Now, in about a week or week and a half, we'll go over ways to solve this and finding this even without graphing. But for now, we're looking at graphing. And again, if this is our revenue function and our cost function, we can find the profit function by taking the revenue function and subtracting the cost function. So go ahead and do that. You can pause the video. I'll resume with the answer briefly, but go ahead and figure that out and then start it again. Start the video again. Resuming the video in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, when we're figuring our profit function, we just simply have to do the algebra with this, and of course we come out with our profit function being y is equal to negative 0.21x squared plus 20x minus 195. Now, take a moment and graph this. Again, pause the video, but remember, before you do that, remember you're going to have to change the scale on your whiteboards to be able to make this fit in. The C is a negative 195, so that's going to mean you're going to have to go down to almost 200 in the negative, and it's going to become positive. So adjust your scale. If you calculate where your vertex is, you know you at least have to go down to negative 195, then you can figure out your scale. So pause the video, and when you're ready to resume it, once you have it graphed, go ahead and resume the video. Starting the video in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, as you can see, here is our graph of our profit function. Remember, again, we were living in Europe, so we're doing this in euros, and it's a large company, so this is thousands of euros. When it goes above 200, it's going above 200,000 euros. So that's a good profit, but you have to share your profit, of course, around with all of the people who've invested in your company to be able to make it profitable. Now, hopefully this video has been a helpful reminder in how to find your break-even point graphically, so you can look at it and figure it out. But it also has been a way to look at some business functions and being able to graph our profit function by looking at our revenue, our income, and our cost functions, taking one and subtracting the other to get our profit. And hopefully this, besides reviewing it, is helpful for when we see homework problems and other problems that talk about graphing the profit function, and the profit function's not given. Later in the course, in about a week and a half, when we're working at solving, then we'll be able to go back to a problem like this break-even point and actually find the exact value of x that it is. But again, that's in a week and a half.